Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new analysis. This is the 24th analysis in the series and there aren't all that many left after this. So this week I figured I'd fulfill the request from a friend of the show, Linus Motor, and analyse Eraser, the very first story, based on the manga's first chapter and can be seen at the beginning of episode 1. Before we get started, I just want to explain that doing this analysis my usual way, i.e. recounting the story with minor observations and digging into the meat of the story at the end, will lead this video to become very top heavy. So I will be making more detailed and analytical observations throughout the narrative description. The story begins with a boy fidgeting behind his textbook. We get a shot of the front of the classroom with the teacher teaching the class. The boy looks up the front for a moment before continuing to make something behind his textbook. This tells us one of two things: that this boy we are looking at is either easily distracted, or that he is doing something that he deems to be more important than schoolwork. Suddenly a voice calls out from beside him, calling him Nishikata. Given that he responds to this call, we are finally informed as to this boy's name. Nishikata reacts to this beckoning with a degree of shock and desperation, telling us that he wants to keep what he is doing a secret. It is at this point that we are introduced to Nishikata's desk neighbour, a girl who he calls Takagi. Takagi asks him what he is doing, and he says that he isn't doing anything, further cluing us in that whatever Nishikata is doing, he doesn't want her to know about it. It also tells us that Nishikata wears his heart on his sleeve and isn't a very good liar. Takagi looks at Nishikata with a great degree of suspicion but does not press him for answers, telling us that she is calmer and possibly even more confident than Nishikata is. It is at this point that the OP begins, and it contextualizes what we have just seen. For a new viewer, the OP would fill them in on the context of the show, that Takagi and Nishikata are locked in a battle of wits, one that Nishikata is always on the losing side of. However, this story will show far more of the dynamic between the two than the OP is able to convey. When the OP is over, we see that Nishikata has completed what he was working on, a paper spring. He then thinks to himself that he has everything he needs to complete his jack-in-the-box. He then thinks that Takagi had better look out. Given all the context of the first few moments in the OP, the viewer should at this point have worked out the plan, that Nishikata has crafted this jack-in-the-box to surprise Takagi. One of the best decisions made for this story is that Nishikata is the first to initiate a prank or a trick. Given that the OP displayed Takagi celebrating victory after victory after victory, if the story had started with a trick she was playing, it would appear as though Takagi were a relentless bully. However, the fact that it begins with a trick from Nishikata tells us that the conflict-driven nature of the relationship is mutual. He looks over at Takagi and sees her struggling to open a pencil case and immediately asks what's wrong. This shows us a more understated part of the relationship, that these two genuinely are friends who don't like to see each other in distress. What a second-time viewer will pick up on is that this is a display of Takagi manipulating Nishikata into doing something or thinking something that she wants him to. She tells him that a pencil case will not open and asks him if he can try to open it. Nishikata takes the pencil case and says that he will, further establishing that these two are friends as well as rivals. However, Nishikata manages to open it on his first attempt, but then this happens. Nishikata has a large bombastic reaction that is played off for comedic effect. This is one of the core aspects of the story. When shocked or teased, Nishikata will always react in a humorous way. We then get a shot of the teacher asking Nishikata what he is screaming about in an aggressive manner. A first-time viewer can tell from this exchange that this teacher is the strict, angry type, something that Nishikata would straight up say in funny face. However, a veteran viewer will also notice a lot of familiar faces in this shot. Going from left to right, we have Takeo, Kimura, Mano, Yukari, Sane, and Mina, each making their first appearance before being properly introduced in pool, cleaning duty, and day duty respectively. By the end of his sentence, all the students have turned back around, further establishing that this teacher is not one that the students want to get in trouble of. Nishikata apologizes for the interruption before hearing Takagi laughing beside him, and it is at this point that we understand her motivation. She makes fun of him for her own amusement. After being given her pencil case back, she tells Nishikata that his reaction was priceless. After struggling to come up with a comeback, he fails and just tells her to shut up, suggesting that he does not work well under pressure. Takagi continues to laugh while Nishikata looks ahead frustrated. Nishikata laments to himself that Takagi had gotten him, and even worse had gotten him with the trick that he was about to use, as he puts the jack-in-the-box away. This suggests that Takagi is always a few steps ahead of Nishikata. It is at this point that we are introduced to one of Nishikata's defining characteristics. He reflects on his failure and determines where he went wrong and how he could have avoided the defeat. This is important because Nishikata is always plotting ways to get back at Takagi, or thinking about what she might be up to. It is this overthinking that even causes his downfall on a few occasions, like in Typhoon or Cleaning Duty. He looks over to Takagi, who is still laughing, but when she stops and looks back at him, he begins to blush and looks away embarrassed. This is the first clue we get that Nishikata might have romantic feelings for Takagi. She asks if she can borrow his eraser, as she had forgotten hers. Nishikata sees an opportunity to get back at her. He asks if she had really forgotten her eraser and derides her for being an airhead. Takagi doesn't seem to be fazed by the insult and thanks Nishikata for loaning her his eraser. Nishikata puts his head down in shame that he had gone as far as insults and that it didn't even work, suggesting that he does have some sort of moral compass when it comes to this rivalry and that not everything is acceptable. This message would be further established in Pool. This is when Takagi tells Nishikata about an old superstition, that if you write your crush's name on an eraser and use it all up, that your crush will fall in love with you. Funny, I usually just drew genitals on mine. Wait, did I reuse that joke? This also shows a fairly minor aspect of Takagi's overall character, and one that I didn't even notice until writing this very script. Takagi is certainly one for superstition and rumours. It starts here with the whole crush on your eraser bit, which we find out later that she takes somewhat seriously. She also knows a bunch of ghost stories for the tunnel in Test of Courage. She puts her faith into fortune telling in Fortune Telling. She believes Mano about the waterslide rumour in Waterslide without a second thought. And even in the Moto series she makes a Teru Teru Bozu in chapter 48.75. Nishikata comments on how childish that belief is, but Takagi curiously takes his eraser out of the cardboard holder to look at the surface. She looks at the eraser with a look of shock on her face, while Nishikata swears that there's nothing written there, but then wonders whether or not he had written something there and forgotten about it. He nervously tells her that he knows she is messing with him, but she smugly looks over and asks if he is sure. Nishikata nervously and desperately asks for the eraser back. She gives it back and he tries to come up with an excuse for whatever is written on there, but he sees that both sides are blank. He becomes frustrated and yells at Takagi that there's nothing written there. He then sees that her eraser is right on the table and calls her out on it. We then see a piece of chalk flying through the air and hits Nishikata on the side of the head. We see that it was the teacher who threw the chalk while Yukari holds back laughter behind him. He apologizes again and Takagi is once again laughing. She pulls herself together and says that they have fooled around enough. Nishikata says that it is his wish for things to stop, but Takagi ignores him and instead asks to use the bathroom, which he gets permission to do. She leaves the room and Nishikata thinks about how he can get her back. He then sees her eraser and has an idea. If he writes someone's name on her eraser, he can make fun of her for it. He wonders whose name he should write as he begins to pull the eraser out, but stops when he realizes that there is already something written there. Nishikata wonders about whether or not he should look, further revealing the friendship beneath the rivalry, but he ultimately decides that he will just look at one letter, which turns out to be Lo. Nishikata is shocked by this but mostly disappointed that it was not his name. He says to himself that it is not as though he is upset, and as I have mentioned several times throughout this analysis series, this is something that he genuinely believes, no matter how wrong it really is. He decides that he wants to know whose name it is, hinting at the jealousy that he will go on to showcase more prominently in Tandem Writing and Horror. He pulls the eraser out and instead of a name sees a message. Look at the hallway. He looks towards the hallway and sees Takagi grinning back at him. Nishikata is shocked that she had gotten him yet again. Takagi laughs and enters the classroom to retake her seat. She tells Nishikata that his face was priceless and that he had acted exactly the way she thought he would. This is a vital aspect of Takagi's character being introduced. Not only is she always a few steps ahead, but she can also either figure out Nishikata's next few moves or guide him down a particular path. In this case, the latter is true. The plan that she executes in the story is likely the most intricate she pulls off in the show, having put the idea of the eraser rumour in his head while also teasing him to make him want payback, and then giving him time alone to let the rest of the dominoes fall into place. Takagi then spells out her motivation for the show rather blatantly, that she can't help but tease him because it's just too funny. Nishikata then goes to tell her that she'd better watch out because one day he will get her back. Takagi says that she thinks it is impossible for him to win, which as we know is only half true. It is possible for him to win, but not without losing in some way, a la Room, who is taller and critical hit, or without Takagi throwing the game, a la Fortune Telling. Takagi says that she doesn't like his odds of winning given that he even lost with a 50-50 chance. When Nishikata asks what she means by this, she says that she isn't going to tell him, but we can see on her eraser the first letter of Nishikata's name, confirming to the audience that she has romantic feelings for him as well. So honestly, this is a pretty good intro to a show. Not the best I've ever seen, because it's not Avatar: The Last Airbender, but not the worst either, because it's not Clannad. It does a great job of establishing the dynamic between Takagi and Nishikata, even sprinkling some extra character details and showing off some of the side characters on the low-key. However, I would argue that the most important part is how it introduces the romance between the two, with Nishikata having feelings that he isn't ready to admit to himself yet, and Takagi having feelings for him that she is fully confident in. And that is it for this analysis. If you want to see the notes or outtakes, you can see them on my website, links in the description. If you want to see the films that I write and direct, check out my parent channel, Big Joe Productions. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.